Good morning, Dumelang, Sanbonani, Absheni. Welcome to yet another, in my view, exciting installment on the CE Forum here at GIBS. And today we are very privileged to be in company with Priscillah Mabelane from Sasol. Now, I have a very special affinity to Sasol because they funded my high school education. So I may be a bit biased when I ask questions, but I'll try my best not to be too biased and to keep the engagement a bit edgy and to operate on this learning platform. Priscillah is Executive Vice President of Energy, one of the most important pillar at Sasol, and in fact it is going to be driving a significant part of the change of transforming Sasol from being one of the biggest polluters in the world from a greenhouse gas emission perspective to hopefully one of the biggest contributors to ensuring our survival as a people on this continent. She is in charge of upstream and downstream gas distribution, marketing and sales in Southern Africa, amongst others. But that's not all that Priscillah is about. She is about unleashing leadership potential. So Priscillah, welcome.
Thank you, Maurice.
So talking about this thing called unleashing leadership potential, because I want to start there because it's about the people that are driving transformation in this country. I know this is not our initiative. It's the initiative of my namesake with the French version of my name, Mr. Maurice Khadebo of Wits Business School, but in his personal capacity. What is this thing called unleashing leadership potential?
Thanks, Maurice. I think first of all, let me thank you for giving me this opportunity to join your platform, but also for the fantastic work that GIBS Business School is working on and the partnership with Sasol as well, as we are developing leadership, but also looking at what are these capabilities and skill sets that we require for the future. There are more and more opportunities for us to partner to ensure that South Africa can continuously be well positioned to be competitive. Coming back to the unleashing leadership potential and doing a bit of marketing for my partner, Maurice, and it's actually an inspirational family foundation that his family and him created, but over a period of time has created a lot of platforms, engagements, mentoring, and really tough dialogues with various leaders. Almost every captain of the industry has engaged on that platform to share their leadership journey, the challenges that they've experienced, but also to make commitments in terms of how we're going to continuously make South Africa inclusive and enhance the capabilities of people, particularly the previously disadvantaged. And coming to that, women as such, which is where I come in. So for the last 4 years, I had the privilege to basically be the lead on the Women and Energy Network that we've now installed or anchored around the unleashing leadership potential, and that's a very exciting part. And one of the things that drive me in terms of women in energy is that when you look at kids that are graduating from high school, perhaps that's because I'm a mother of girls. So I have 2 girls and I look at how brilliant they are. I look at my niece who is now in grade 8. She's top of the class and she's been top of the class all the time. And I just think, how capable are we? And yet, when you come to the work environment, when you come to the business, we are highly represented. But yet, from university graduates, there are lots of very capable, driven, passionate females and women that come into our businesses. And then we go through, at some point, what I call a funnel, that we are not able to pull through that talent. And I look at it, and recently someone was saying it's headwinds. And I said, but those headwinds are driven both sides. They're cultural headwinds that we need to face on and deal with, especially as mothers, how we raise our sons. The second part of that is the headwinds that are created in the organization.
Yeah.
And at times we're saying it's unbiased, it's biases that we are unconscious about. I don't believe so.
Yeah.
We have to set the right tone. So that's how I got attracted to this opportunity. and just sharing experiences, networking, where are the entrepreneurial businesses and opportunities going forward as the energy transition is now real, where are opportunities going to be for women? How do we bring innovation into that space? Where should women position themselves to play?
You know, you talk about the girl child and how brilliant they are. And I know this is going to sound completely elitist. and I apologize in advance, unreservedly. But I used to serve on the school board or school council of one of the elite private schools here, a boys' private school in Johannesburg. And from what I remember, and I check every year, they continuously outperform all the boys' schools as measured by A's per boy in matric. And yet, they've only once outperformed the girls' schools. On a continuous basis, all the girls' schools outperform even the best boys' schools. It's insane, the kind of gap that there is in terms of intelligence. So it doesn't come as a surprise to me, because I live with amazingly smart women around me. And so I yield to their intelligence all the time. But talking about that within the context of Sasol, I did warn you that we have almost a third representation of women in the boardroom at Sasol. But we're doing less well on the executive committee. What accounts for that, and what can we look forward to in the future to address this? Because I think at a baseline, we need a minimum of a third representation. At a baseline, that's like the foundation, right? And then we need to then go and take it really seriously and say we need appropriate and at a minimum equal representation. Because it's like we're saying, the smartest people in the world are not running the world. So what can we expect from Sasol in this regard?
Maurice, as I said earlier on, I actually said we're making traction. At least we now have 2 women at the group executive committee level. So give us time. But let me just now go on a serious note. It is a big challenge for every South African organization. And I think it's also quite important that when we approach this, we actually don't bring women only in the functional areas, which predominantly is what corporates will do. So we need to make sure that we bring women as well in some of the most technical and complex areas, because, and also on meritocracy, so that we can create the confidence and inspire more to be pulled through. So when you look at my team, I was quite deliberate, because fortunately I joined at the time when we were actually going through the Sasol transformation and transition of Sasol 2.0, which has been quite exciting, but yet an opportunity to say, what is the Sasol of the future looking like? And I can talk on behalf of my colleagues is that we're all passionate about it. And as part of that, from myself perspectively, I set myself clear messages to say, I would like to have the right representation, not only women, but of particularly Africans and coloureds, who are still predominantly underrepresented in our business as well and across multiple businesses. But what it would take for us to do that is to grow a very strong pipeline so that we can bring the women into this executive roles. And that pipeline comes from breaking that middle management, because that's where the challenges are. So when you pull the talent through at middle management, women just disappear. So how do we crack that and ensure that we can pull more and more? So we are setting ourselves targets and we are working on it, but I don't think it's about the target really. It's really about doing the right thing and being clear and setting the tone from the top, which our CEO does. At the same time, it's also making sure that what we say and what we do are aligned. And that's the commitment that perhaps next time when I come back here, you can say, congratulations, you've got another woman or another one.
I'd like to
and
do
on
that.
the next level of our executive teams as well.
Yeah.
But having said that, I also think that while we're all celebrating a third, it is just not appropriate.
It's not good enough.
We are still more than 50%.
Yeah.
So we need to basically say it's the right thing to do. If I look at my business and I look at my customers when we do the market insights, they're predominantly women. From a decision buying power perspective, how we influence in the world, So we need to change the dynamics so that we can connect with our customers as well.
So when I read your sustainability report, as well as your integrated report of 2021, the four main SDGs are SDG 8, which broadly is about inclusive growth, SDG 12 about the sustainable growth concept, and sustainable consumption, and SDG 17 about climate action. We're going to come back to climate action, and SDG 17 about partnerships. What is lagging for me, which in this conversation is a focus on SDG 16, which is about social justice, right? And I would say perhaps I know that Sasol does a lot of work in this space of social responsibility, and there's a lot of evidence in your integrated report. But I think we do need to be a lot more deliberate in driving this notion about women in leadership in organizations.
I can't agree with you more on that, and I'll discuss it with my colleagues as well. We probably succinctly put it in because of our approach to matters as well. But just to give you an example of how that is so critical, a couple of years ago, I was actually in my previous life in a different board that I used to serve. I was in Ireland, and they were talking about gender-based violence. And it was quite interesting because you think about it that 1/3 of us is subjected to gender-based violence. And how as leaders do we think that if I look at our business, at the EXCO, I look at our leadership teams, it's what is the role that we're playing? Don't we think that at least 1/3 of our employees, because we are representing the society, could be subjected to that? How do we enable them? How do we talk about this in a way that it doesn't feel like it is actually a challenge, but it's a norm, and we can make a difference in the society? If I look at the way we approach safety, we actually expect it to be in our hearts and minds, so that the Sasol employees are the ambassadors and the representatives of safety wherever they go. How we drive, how we engage with society. We could do the same when it comes to issues of social justice as well. And we are making imperatives and starting to engage in these dialogues, but I think there is an opportunity for us to do more, particularly given our prominent role in South Africa as well. So I do agree with you on that.
So highlighting two women, yourself, and the chair of your social and ethics committee, in terms of important work that you're doing. And here I've just focused on one element of social justice. I want to switch now to your core focus of SDG 13, climate action. And more recently, I think it was on the 21st of September, you issued a media statement as part of publishing your integrated report that you commit to net zero ambition by 2050, right? And this includes tripling your 2030 greenhouse gas emissions, where I think your reporting indicates, and I might be in the wrong in terms of a baseline, but Sasol produces 67,000 kilotons of CO2 emissions. And I'm not sure whether you're kind of saying you're going to reduce that to 20-odd thousand, or is there different baselines? So the numbers are irrelevant, but it's more about the intent and the actions. I wonder if you could take us into your confidence about what does this mean for your business unit, the energy business that you are in charge of within Sasol.
Okay, so I think first of all, we're quite excited about the sustainability ambitions that the world, including South Africa, has actually set going forward to 2050. So earlier on, you started introducing that we are one of the biggest emitters. Just a joke, I was actually at the infrastructure symposium of government, and someone mentioned that, then the alarm went off, and they thought I have actually triggered the alarm. It was so funny. But if you just think about where the world is going and what Sasol's role is and the role of energy in terms of that. So we're running one of the most complex and biggest operations in Southern Africa. My colleague Bernard, who's managing our operations, and I have actually worked with the teams to say, as part of this 2050 roadmap of net zero at a group level, what does it mean for our energy business? And in terms of that, we've defined multiple pathways because the future is uncertain. But what we are quite clear around is, as part of that, we can actually start putting tangible plans to get us into 2030. So the target that you were mentioning earlier on is up to 2030. So we're going to reduce our scope 1 and 2 by target of 30%. Most of that is underpinned. We are putting a lot of energy efficiency initiatives to be able to achieve that. At the same time, we're also bringing in more and more new renewables. So we've recently announced that my team is actually busy sourcing that, 1,200 megawatts of energy into our operations. And then thirdly, we bring more and more gas. We are one of the biggest gas users in the country, and really over time have stimulated the economy of Mozambique in terms of gas exploration and developments, and we're going to increase that substantially. So that's one part to 2030, and that tripling was because previous was 10%, now it's at 30%. To 2050, beyond 2030, we're seeing hydrogen, green hydrogen, starting to play a bigger role. And why we're so confident about our role in that is that we're currently producing about 2.4 million tons of green hydrogen, and from coal, of course, and then over time it will be blue because we'll produce from gas as we bring transitional gas as a feedstock. Then hydrogen will play a role. So we expect the cost and learning curves of renewables to go down, electrolyzers to go down, and that will stimulate more and more use of hydrogen. And we're embarking in a number of projects I'll talk about later on to get us into that. So this is exciting. So if you think about Sasol and just take one of our operations, Secunda, we could actually produce up to 7.5 million tons of sustainable products, whether you need fuels for your for heavy duty mobility, or whether we're talking about sustainable aviation fuel, particularly given what IATA has set itself as an ambition to reduce emission, or whether we're talking about sustainable chemicals. So that's an exciting journey for Sasol, and we will do this with partners. So it's quite exciting. So the decarbonization, while it has risks during the transition, it gives us huge opportunity to be a big player and change the narration. So we will actually come and say to others, we can sell you opportunity to offset your emissions.
Absolutely.
Because we can actually become beyond that.
So I did say I was biased. You had me at Secunda. It just took me back many years ago when I was 17 and I lived in a small township called Mbalenhle. and worked in a mine called Middle Belt Mine in Secunda. So anyway, coming back to reality to today, let's drill down on some of those initiatives. Earlier last week, I had the privilege of hosting a climate action conference with, amongst others, one of your partners from Globalec, John Smelser. Yes. And you were coming under attack from a shareholder activist called Just Share, in terms of the bruising relationship that you have with them. And John actually put a very nice perspective of saying, yes, it may well be that Sasol has to work on terms of how it engages with shareholder activists, but there's a lot to offer. And specifically, he outlined the relationship that Sasol has with a partner, Globalec, in Mozambique. So I wonder if you could just express to us and just give us a sense of the scope of work that Sasol is involved with and how you navigate some of the challenges of operating in a highly contested political space that Mozambique is.
Okay, thanks. And just on Just Share and how we're engaging with activism and activist groups, etc. Our CEO for the last couple of weeks since our Capital Markets Day has been heavily engaging with all our partners, including our stakeholders, to make sure that we take them on a journey going forward. I think there is a good appreciation that the energy transition is a dual challenge for all of us. And we will continuously focus on the engagements, the dialogues. And as we do that, we have to ensure that we are doing it in a just transition. And we are, especially Just Share, like the just.
I had you at just, right?
So we should do it in that manner. I can come back to that. Taking back to your question of Mozambique, we've been in Mozambique for now almost closer to 2 decades. And we started in our Panta demand in terms of looking for gas opportunities because we had a foresight of the need for us to be able to reduce our dependency on coal. And that's what we've been doing. Our reserves in Mozambique, in terms of our current reserves, are starting to reduce in terms of the plateau, but nevertheless we are investing. As we're speaking now, we have last year announced a $760 million investment to extend the plateau that we are currently working on with Mozambican government. At the same time, we are working with Mozambican government to look at the reserves that are not yet developed around the Pante area as well. So we're progressing with that. But Mozambique has huge potential. If you then move from the south and the central part of Mozambique into the north, and the Rovuma opportunities that are there, it's quite important as SADC that we work jointly together in terms of partnerships. And I'm encouraged from a security perspective to see the interventions that SADC is doing in Mozambique to make sure that we can actually maximize opportunities on the ground. And part of that then, it actually implies that we can bring that gas back to South Africa. And just for our listeners to understand, Sasol is not the only gas user. We have a lot of industries, particularly that are the hard-to-abate industries that are relying on gas, and they are actually creating jobs on the ground. I've been engaging with our customers. They want to extend their furnaces in manufacturing of glass, steel, and the uncertainty around gas is creating a risk for them. And while renewables will play over time, for hard-to-abate industry, you can't use renewables. Hydrogen is only solution, and it's still not cost. So from an environmental perspective, so Maurice, to come back to your question, it is a highly regulated environment with multiple stakeholders. And for us, it starts with a meaningful contribution to Mozambique, our relationship with the communities. I've spent a couple of weeks ago there with the communities and with the our government, and engaging on a number of strategic initiatives and how do we improve the lives of the people of Mozambique, and also ensuring that we contribute to the safety, the health and the environmental areas. And to that extent, I really believe that Sasol plays a critical role for Mozambique. And we got the commitment of Mozambique government. The communities recognize the contributions that we're making, but we know that it's a journey. And we are continuously looking for ways to better ourselves. So we're hoping that also from an environmental activist, we can continue to work together.
Sure.
How do we better the lives today?
So I want to understand that this notion of the rules of the game, you know, because I read somewhere, I think it's in your integrated report, you're targeting between 11 and 13 projects alone in Mozambique, right? And you mentioned $1, so I have to convert that into rand because I don't buy bread in dollars. So we're talking almost 10 billion rand that you've committed in the short run in Mozambique. That's a huge amount of money. I think as a proportion of their GDP, you're a significant investor in their country. That shows you kind of like a vote of confidence in the country as a company. But you'll only do that when they are creating appropriate conditions. And I ask this because I'm going to ask you in the context of South Africa, but let's stay in Mozambique. What are the policy decisions that Mozambique as a country is making that gives you the confidence to continue investing so much in that country?
Okay. I think first of all, what is quite encouraging, particularly in terms of our industry specifically, is the acknowledgement that it's an economy that is in transition with huge potential. And gas, from an energy perspective, is going to play a critical role. And what encourages us is the transparency. So there's clarity of where Mozambique is intending to go. Our CEO is also continuously engaging with the president of Mozambique. I've been engaging with ministers. So we don't find Mozambique very difficult to operate within. So we have clarity of what are the policies in terms of environmental processes we need to follow. At times they might not be well documented, but from a Sasol perspective, we've got best class policies and procedures, and we apply them everywhere else we operate, irrespective of the policies in the country. And we work with those countries. We partner with them to enhance that. So we have all of Mozambique policies, whether it's environmental assessment, compliance, safety, on the human side in terms of work permits, which are very, very robust programs for how you bring experts into the country, the work permits. And we are working jointly with government to make sure that they're enhanced and aligned to best practice. So we don't find anything limiting at all. So from that perspective, I think it's a mindset of how, as a corporate, we approach government and how we partner with them. And have the dialogues as well, where we differ, find ways to resolve it in the best interest of the countries, because we are hosted in those countries. So from that perspective, I think we are very glad and really encouraged by the government of Mozambique. Recently, we've been talking about the regional gas master plan, which Mozambique is driving. We have partnerships with them in terms of all of the state-owned entities, like we are doing now in South Africa. So we are copying the same model we have in Mozambique to South Africa. We are also enhancing it with Mozambique. So it's working extremely well. And as you said, we are the biggest contributor to employment, biggest contributor to the economy from a tax perspective. But we have to make sure that we unlock value for the country, not to depend on one or two businesses, but more globally, unlock value from the resources. It is still one of the poorest countries,
Yeah.
and it's our role to stimulate the economy.
Lovely. So let's flip then into South Africa, where you were telling me earlier about the amazing projects that you are doing, and that you announced at the recent infrastructure conference. But before we go into the projects themselves, and I wonder if you could give us a sense, because as a South African living here, experiencing, as Thabiso team of Power FM says, going in the wrong direction. We're going to COVID level 1, but ESCOM level 2. I was like, it's wrong, guys. Please, let's all go in the same direction, right? So we got a sensing like a lack of policy certainty around the energy sector. They might be saying the right things, but the action doesn't indicate as much yet to us. And we're hearing that Mozambique is a lot more policy certain, has a better track record. Is this a fair assessment, or am I just uninformed about what's happening in the policy space in South Africa around energy and energy security?
I think I would say it's balanced, but again, a push to say what is our role as the private sector. And as Sasol, because I continue coming back to our business, we don't find it as challenging as it is. There are times when it's challenging. Give a recent example on clean fuels. We got a surprise of, we were talking and working with government that clean fuels legislation to convert to Euro 5 specification is going to take 5 years. And we had our plans to do that, which we are progressing in Secunda, and suddenly the legislation get pronounced is shorter than the 5 years, it's 2 years. But just to demonstrate the relationship with government, the minute we engaged, they then realized that actually there is an opportunity for us to amend and work together. So there are a number of things that I also re-emphasized, and our CEO continued to re-emphasize in our engagements with government to say we have to have certain enablements going forward. Regulation and policy certainty is one of them. But part of this also goes back to capability and skill set in the private sector, but also in government, and I'll come back to that. The other part is, how do we collaborate? Are we engaging with government in a way that we are finding meaningful solutions and prioritizing some of this policy uncertainty? And I think we can do better both sides to help government with that. But I must say that we are finding, especially in the last couple of years, that government is more conducive to dialogues, engagements. The announcements we've made, we could not have managed that without the partnerships that we're having with government, without them understanding that for hydrogen to really grow, we need a policy certainty. And how are we going to put a strategy? What is the master plan? Under Minister Patel, government has already taken an initiative to put together a hydrogen panel to be able to drive the commercialization of hydrogen and the policies that are required, which is more proactive. And that's really something we need to recognize. At the same time, when we look at Sasol, we decided as Sasol, for the very same dialogues that there's policy uncertainty, to say, let's put together an energy council that brings power together, hydrogen, fuels, etc., the petrochemical together. And Fleetwood, who's our CEO, is chairing that, and it's actually sponsored by Minister Gwede. So what I'm trying to say is that there are gaps, but there's a lot of dialogues, robustness, and progress that we are making, and we have to continuously work together to make it better, because pointing fingers is not going to happen, and have those robust discussions. And where there are capabilities, let's work together with government to enhance them.
I couldn't agree with him. I do worry that as a country, though, because you said you'll come back to the capabilities part, I do worry that as a country, though, we underestimate the challenge we have at a skill level, whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector. And I think that is actually going to be our Achilles heel in terms of our ambitions are much bigger than our capability. I wonder if you could weigh in on that.
Yeah, I think on that one, I'm going to throw it back at you.
Yeah.
and again, going back to the whole issue of policy clarity and how do we work with government and how is South Africa positioned to be globally competitive. I mean, I engage with a number of global investors that wants to be in South Africa, especially now with the transition journey of energy. So, and then I think about it, where it's GIBS, VERDS, UCT, etc. in the space. how are we working together to create the platforms to ensure that we start to understand the future skill set that are required? How do you second your best capabilities to work with government on policies? How do we work jointly with them? And unless you do that with a purpose and set the tone, it's not going to happen. So if you look at countries like the UK, which I've studied before comprehensively, and you look at Singapore, it was a private partnership. The institutions were playing a big role of seconding people to government that understands the businesses. The universities were at the heart of it, but we are fragmented as a country. And the university are at the heart of that, jointly with the Department of Science and CSIR. So how do we bring it all together? So I'm going to leave a request to you to say, can you be an ambassador like Sasol is doing? Anchor that integration for us and really ensure that we disrupt our ways of working. Because even on digital, we had Telkom yesterday on the panel talking about digitalization and its potential in South Africa. And if you take the energy transition, the digital transition, you play at the heart of that.
Yeah. So, you know, I've been listening to interviews on radio about Tyson Fury and Wilder. These are boxers. They're not as articulate as Muhammad Ali, but they're also just interesting to listen to. And they're like always kind of throwing smut at each other. My favorite smut comes from Mike Tyson, who says, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. and I think you just punched me in the face. So my plan is out the window. But I'm going to take you up on that invitation for us and other institutions of higher education to work together, as opposed to throwing punches at people and pointing fingers at people, to work together and become a force for good, particularly in this. There's a combination of a leadership gap as well as a technical gap. So thank you for throwing that punch. I'm starting to breathe again. And let me go and take a break and go into the questions from LinkedIn. I'm going to give you a few which are in the same space, which then maybe will allow you to give a sense of some of the projects. So Mark Fuller says, great discussion. Can you ask about possible future energy crunch? You can maybe engage with this at the same time as John, who's interested in to reduce policy. Do you plan to reduce your sulfur content of your energy products? HFO 150, diesel, IP, and Jet A1 specifically. And then Emma says, good morning. It's really encouraging to hear the great partnership initiatives between Sasol is embarking on. They were clearly articulated at SIDSA in the past. I'm sure the link to ESG agenda will be top of mind. And so I wonder if you could take all of these and share some of your plans around your energy transition at a practical level, at a project level, around some of the stuff that you announced at the most recent infrastructure conference, for example. Okay,
so if I come back to our immediate actions of what we're actually doing, both on the sulfur, the broader GHG content, including air quality. We actually, as I've indicated, the first company, despite the fact that there isn't an incentive in place for companies to transition towards clean fuels 2 implementation, we have decided in Secunda to invest 5 billion rand. And we are making progress. So by 2023, we will probably, from a petrol perspective, be CF2 compliant and be able to produce CF2 for petrol. Diesel will be by 2025. And all of this is making sure that we are compliant with that. So we are excited about the journey, but it doesn't stop there. As we come into 2030 and going forward, and we're starting to be more innovative on where do we and how do we, what is the role we play to bring the cost of hydrogen down. So the biggest cost drivers of hydrogen is renewables, which over time we've seen renewables coming down to about 60%, but they still need to go further down for us to ensure that green hydrogen is more sustainable. Electrolyzers are at the infancy. There's a lot of investments at the global level. We've seen huge multiple dollar investments, billion-dollar investments that have been made by all of our players, including ourselves globally, to drive the cost of electrolyzers, particularly the OEMs. So as we start scaling up the 1 gigawatt and up in terms of green hydrogen projects, we'll see the cost coming down. So our expectation is that as we get into 2030, we will see the cost of hydrogen below the $2 to $1.5 per kilogram. And to put that into context, it means at that stage, we can actually ramp up all of our products. In Secunda, for example, we can reduce our product slate to significantly to be more greener. And also whether I was talking about fuels or whether it's sustainable aviation fuels, but we're not stopping there. So to also anchor and incubate the transition, we've announced a number of projects, and this was triggered by the fact that as we were engaging with our customers, our stakeholders, there's always a chicken and egg part. Someone says, I'm waiting for the cost of hydrogen to be more competitive to invest. And then someone else says, I'm waiting for the refueling infrastructure to be available. And then we are saying, we need trucks and buses to be able to do the pilots that we require to test hydrogen and to drive the cost down. So as Sasol, we took a very bold step to say we are going to start projects. So for example, in Secunda, we're going to produce green hydrogen by 2023 of 60 megawatts of renewables that we'll be installing, and that is going to stimulate production of green steel. Production over time, we want to work with the steel manufacturing to say how can we stimulate green steel and revitalize the steel industry. What about mobility, heavy duty mobility, the trucks and minings? We're going to apply that. If then the cost starts to get down below the $2, we will accelerate. So we are watching the signpost, but proactively wanting to influence the signpost with our innovation. So what I can say in summary, Maurice, so it's just to say we have a number of projects. We are producing or intending to produce sustainable aviation fuel at Secunda. We're going to produce hydrogen at Sasolburg. We are looking at export opportunities, the one I mentioned over the last couple of days that we launched at Boegoebaai, to be able to anchor the demand, drive the cost down at scale, and then we can produce, imagine Sasol of the future. Everything is green, sustainable by 2040. What a great ambition, what a great situation
for someone like
country.
me who grew up as a young boy with asthma, that's a great response. But there are others on the call that are not as persuaded just yet. So Ananthan says, good to hear about Sasol producing green hydrogen. And like, just be more specific about your strategies. Saman Baloy says, great questions. But we have got great plans, but what is our execution capacity? And Amrith specifically is talking about, Amrith, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, about how truly sustainable will be your sustainable aviation fuels. So can you kind of persuade us that these are not just plans, they are implementable plans, you've got capability, you've got resources behind it. So take us a little bit into your confidence in this regard.
I mean, just starting with the sustainable aviation fuel, that's a very good question. I think first of all, we've seen that IATA has actually set itself some ambitious target to be net zero by 2050. And we do know that there are currently technologies that are in existence that are predominantly dependent on biofeedstock. And we all understand that biofeedstock has a limitation in terms of resources on the ground. So over time, they will reach a limit. So part of that then implies that we all have to shift towards direct air capture solutions coupled with hydrogen. And this is where our Fischer-Tropsch technology that is then able to convert that green feedstock into producing of sustainable aviation fuel. So, and we can do that in Secunda today with very limited investments in terms of our existing infrastructure, and really ensuring that we utilize our Fischer-Tropsch technology, which is feedstock agnostic. So we can bring more gas if it's cheaper at scale. We can bring hydrogen when it's more competitive at scale. So there are certain global factors that are going to drive the cost of hydrogen. And we are watching that and we are playing into the space. It will actually have an impact on our plans. But as I demonstrated, we are already working with multi-partners and we are actually playing into the global hydrogen proposals and ensuring that we are in those platforms. So that's one part. The second part of this is that Sasol produces 2.4 million tons of grey hydrogen. As the cost of hydrogen comes in, it will be quite easy for us just to pivot that to green hydrogen. So it shows our ability to do this. But coming back to this, I would be remiss not to recognize the fact that there are new skill sets we don't have. we're not necessarily a renewables player. We don't have we haven't developed and participate in electrolyzers technology, nor do we intend to, because we believe both the renewables and electrolyzers over time will become more and more commoditized. And we've seen the US and Europe making huge announcements towards supporting these technologies going forward, including sustainable aviation. So at the back of that, there's a lot of announcements around getting investments in these technologies. And we are talking to partners. We are already in NDAs with a number of parties on the OEM side to be able to ensure that we can roll those out in our businesses. So that's one. Where we intend to build capability is to strengthen our current capabilities in terms of commercial, to make sure that we can continuously work with our customers and push them to incubate and start to transition towards green and sustainable products. Because that's that part that we should remember, that we are producing products for customers. Because what are we going to do with fuel? So we then have to work with our customers. So we are building capability. We've brought in both, we are bringing in both external and internal capability in terms of that. The other element is our engineering capability, from a capacity as well as from new capabilities. We are working with universities, but internally as well, we are enhancing that significantly. And a third element of that is on the operational side. Most of these projects are going to be, we're pivoting and repurposing existing operations, but we're also participating in green field transactions. So we're not going to do that alone. We bring in partners around the ecosystem, and Sasol has the experience over time to work on that. So I'm quite comfortable that we're going to get there, but we have to do this in a just transition. I keep on emphasizing that. Yeah. We have learned in the past with other projects that were successful and others that have failed. We've taken lessons out of that. We will do it in partnerships. We will do it in a just manner. We will make sure we capacitate and enhance our teams, but we also need to get the mindset and culture of our organization right to deliver today so that we can fund the future projects. Because if we don't deliver on our existing commitments and make these operations efficient and maximize value, we will not be able to fund those future aspirations. So we are driving all of that, and I think so far we are demonstrating we can.
So just because you punched me earlier, I'm going to punch you back, and I'm going to bring a secret weapon. I don't know this person, but she asks an interesting, controversial question. Candice van der Ventel says, in bid window 5, no grid capacity was available in the Northern Cape. Is this a strategy to support Sasol's and IDC's study in developing the green hydrogen and ammonia market in the Northern Cape, thus securing resources? What is your view on this?
I think, interestingly enough, if unless I have not made it very clear, we want to convert Secunda into green hydrogen.
Yeah, but that's in the Free State. I mean, that's in Mpumalanga.
That's in Mpumalanga. So think about it. How are we going to do that? You either run a hydrogen pipeline, which will be complex, from Northern Cape or Western Cape to Mpumalanga, or alternatively, you will the energy. Yeah. So in every dialogue, even in the last couple of days, I've emphasized the infrastructure requirements. We've been very clear to the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, to government. We also discussed it with President Ramaphosa, that we have to upgrade the transmission system. I personally come from Limpopo, and I remember the old days where I used to go to school walking in the dusty areas, having to go and fetch water to come and boil with coal, if we're lucky to get coal or wood. And there are so many Priscillas still. At my age, a couple of years back in Limpopo, even when I go back to the rural areas. So what we do as Sasol is not only about our best interest, but it's also what does it mean in improving the lives of South Africans. Modernizing the grid is the biggest imperative for the country. And we are discussing that with DMRE, with ESCOM, and our CEO in the Energy Council has also brought this as an anchor for the country. So we will not do anything that is selfishly for our purpose. So it's quite important for your viewers as well to understand that.
Yeah, so Candice, that punch didn't land, sorry. So let's now pivot back to where we started and back to the topic of leadership, because I must say, I'm going to give you an assessment right now. This has been a very impressive conversation. I can see that you're on top of your game. And a few of the viewers, people like Tracy and Peacock, George Bennett and Gugus Melane, for example, are really, really interested in this role of women in leadership. And they were so grateful that we had it. So, for example, Gugu says, thank you for this great conversation, what would you say are the key attributes necessary for women to unlock opportunities at executive level, for example?
Yeah, thank you. I think most of the time it starts with confidence. And I always say that you need to anchor your career. And in anchoring that career, you then need to say, what is your value proposition in life? And business is like that. What am I bringing to the game? So we have to make sure that women are given opportunities for growth, and as such, they're also embracing it and drive your own. So anchor your career. You cannot be all over. You have to be clear around what is your value proposition to the business. That's the first thing, and my advice to that. The second part is every leader has to have proposition for their employees and set the tone from the top in terms of diversity and inclusion. And if an organization is lacking on that, through their values, through their purpose, the country and the world is not going to change. So that's quite important. And as such, then it requires courage. What are the difficult conversations that as women we're having in terms of the headwinds we're experiencing in the work environment, and dealing with them transparently and head on? So that becomes quite important. But one of the things that I want to also bring into play, and at my level, is it's just amazing how many males are interviewed in jobs. And when they know 20% of the content, they offer you the world. And yet when women know 80% of the content, or 90, and they don't know the 10%, we tend to limit ourselves in terms of the value proposition and being articulative. And maybe it's a lack of role models, but how do we then ensure that we create more role models? We challenge women to be able to take risks on their careers and be able to step into it, but also we need to support each other. So when I look at Sasol, my biggest purpose beyond these exciting things we spoke about, transitioning the business, it's all achieved because I've got a fantastic team. My job is to make a better world, and not only for Sasol employees, not for women, but also for the country. So if the contributions I'm making in Sasol, not only delivering the shareholder value, demonstrating that we are changing customer value proposition, those I can do. But fundamentally, the purpose is to make sure that there's more Priscillas in the future. And then there's also more and more people with energy going forward, affordable energy into the future. And that's transformational purpose that I have. And as such, it drives me every day. When I see appointments, which some I make, and that is not representative, I want to understand, was the panel representative? Was the candidate list representative? And there's a lot of excuses all the time. And that perpetual development of women and black people has to stop. But it starts with me.
Yeah. So let's talk about maybe away from Sasol and a lot more towards Priscilla, so that other Priscillas can understand the journey that you have walked. And how is it that you come to be this confident, super competent, highly purposeful person? What if you go back as far back as you want to? What inspired it? Who inspired it? What event? And how did you navigate some of the challenges and opportunities through your career?
That's an interesting question I answer all the time. I think, first of all, it's luck. And I always say it's luck because of where I was born. I didn't choose my parents. So I'm the eldest at home. And so my dad had a daughter, another daughter. So I don't know whether that forced him to start thinking, I could make money through lobola, or I could make the best out of my kids. It's a different discussion altogether. But I have been extremely advantaged to grow in a family where my dad from the beginning actually involved us in business at a very early age. I always say that I started typing in his office at the age of 11. So when I was at a boarding school and I went back home, I was a typist. And at a younger age, growing with my grandmother, she used to sharpen those woods. It goes and gets sticks and sharpen them for us to count. And when I come back from school, it will be counting from 1 to 10. At that stage, I'm in sub A. Those of you know what that is. And so you have an investment by your grandmother, who, by the way, knows nothing about a classroom, and she walked me to school every day in those dusty roads. My dad, who kept me typing, and if you do a typewriter, those who understand it, you have to be extremely extremely excellent, because if you make a mistake, you can't go all delete.
It's not a computer.
No. And that really brought a lot of diligence in me at a very early age, because the typewriter stayed between me and my time to play. And that was one of the things that my dad invested in us. And then education. And my dad was not one of those people who spoke a lot. Nothing. I don't remember even today my dad saying, "Thou shalt do 1, 2, 3, 4." He lived the values. He gave us the opportunities. He cheered us up. And even today, he still sees us as the most capable people, brilliant, beautiful. So he's been my anchor over time from an inspirational perspective. And every job I've been to, I remember when I first started at Ernst & Young with articles, he came to see the partners at Ernst & Young in Maritzburg. So you walk the office, he met all of them. I was quite embarrassed. Oh my, no one can just speak about them. But then I had other role models, and interestingly, all men. And most of them were exceptional, demanding individuals. You put a lot of hard work into it. And you have to make sure that whatever you produce has to be perfect. And I remember at EY, I was working with some of the partners that I had to set myself, I'm very driven by nature, to say, this time I want to give my partner this file that it never comes back with any queries. And then you get 15 queries, you beat yourself, why didn't I see this? But over time, I learned that growth is also humility. And learning is humility as part of that. So I have to embrace that. And the minute I opened myself up to say, I have to learn, I just became a better person. I learned from the most junior people in the organization. I talk to everyone at any level. I'm not an engineer. How do I understand the technologies? How do I understand the solutions? I walk in, I get on a truck, I drive with our truck drivers to understand what are the challenges on the ground. When I was in Mozambique, I go and visit our projects on the ground with communities. I go and visit our teams that are doing the seismic work and assessments, talk to them, understand the challenges, understand the hazards, what barriers are we putting in. I have to open myself up to that learning. So that's how I've been inspired. So it's a number of people, but most of that went back to, who is Priscilla? What do you want to achieve? And then the other part that I want to bring in as well is that from an inspiration perspective, it's the fact that I see so many women that are so capable and yet don't have the opportunity I've had. And I'll continue to be inspired to be better for them, so that we don't use the one exception that fails as a general norm, but we bring more and more examples so that there can be more role models. So that responsibility I carry every day.
Beautiful. So if I were to, we learn from inspiration, but we also learn from mistakes, from things going wrong. I wonder if you could share, in the spirit of learning, where things haven't quite worked out the way you expected them to, and maybe in the moment it just felt like, oh, this is just the end of it. But when you look back, you say that's a turning point that really helped to pivot me in the right direction.
Yeah. Let me give 3 lessons. One from a personal perspective. I know you want me to be short.
No, we've got time.
One of those is I've been brilliant through school and really just passing. And at some stage it makes you a bit arrogant.
It's a bit like GIBS MBA students.
Yeah.
They think they're so amazing.
Yeah, you know that. And you can do anything. You're just arrogant. And I remember when I was doing my honors at University of Natal, and of all the subjects, I failed management accounting. I was brilliant. I got a very good mark, exceptional mark in accounting, and I failed management accounting. And our partners thought they can actually give me an opportunity to do a supplementary, to write the supplementary, because it was going to hold me a year back, because you had to pass CTA, all the subjects. And the lecturer sat me down and said, I'm not going to give it to you. And because I don't think you've pulled yourself, it's not your best effort. So how can you get all of these marks in other subjects? And you don't have an interest in the subject, so tough luck. So I lost a year. I repeated that year, and I knew everything. And I passed my board exam first time. And I learned a lot from that, to say, you actually, your mindset and your drive determines your outcome. So that was one learning that I've had at a personal level. It was painful, and I'm grateful for it. The second learning was, and I want to go back to the topic of leadership. As a black woman, and particularly in South Africa, we're still male-dominated. And at times I even see some, even bankers, I challenge them more and more. They come to meetings to meet an executive who's a woman, and it's all men, and they don't feel embarrassed about it. So I was at Ernst & Young, and I went to a meeting with all men in a meeting. Actually, I picked up something that was technically right. But the way I approached it, because as I walked in there, the first assumption was that they're not listening to me because I'm black, I'm a woman, and they're all white and one black man, and I'm being undermined. And I behaved poorly. And although I was right from a technical perspective, the way the message landed was wrong. So how do we make sure that despite the circumstance, and I have no doubt that it was the attitude of those men, probably. But do I have to act the same way they're acting? Or should I be different? Yeah. What do I have to lose? So that's one of the things that I continuously encourage people that are trying to maneuver and navigate the complex world of business to say, don't make assumptions. Yeah. But even if you do, be different. Be the change you want to see, because the dots will connect. And then a third element is really, I believe that I couldn't be where I am, my businesses that I've run could not be where I am if I didn't make a bucket of mistakes and learn from them. The only challenge is repeating the mistakes, because otherwise the business will not grow and we will not grow. Especially as we move into the energy transition, we need to ensure innovation, agility. So how do you quickly learn, enable people to unlock the potential they have through creating an conducive environment for them to grow?
So the key lessons I took out of that are, one, even if you lose a year, take that knock, because you'll gain your humility, an important lesson for life, right? And two, please understand, it's not just about being the bigger person, but it's really about how you show up, and show up for you and not for others, and really be comfortable with the person that you are as you show up every day. And three, don't make the same mistake twice, because there are plenty more to be made out there, so that you can learn and grow from each of those mistakes. So as we conclude, Priscilla, let me tell you, the LinkedIn has exploded. So I'm going to mention a few people. People like Matabo says, thank you, Priscilla. Every time I listen to you, I'm aware of how humble and knowledgeable you are. Keep flying the flag for Sasol. Thank you from Witness, Priscilla, strategic vision on green hydrogen, inspiring. Thank you for inspiring women. You gave me courage to look outside of my comfort zone. Caesar says, profound and so important. Priscilla wants to see more Priscillas. Feels so good to lead with great leadership. Thank you, Priscilla, Morris, and Sasol, for a great conversation. I had to throw that one in, just somebody was thanking me. and there's more and more, right? Nero says, you are one of my role models, and I'm glad that you are a possibility for me to look up to. And Princess finally says, Miss Priscilla is such a consistent and genuine leader. I remember the same narratives when she shared her story at the conversation that met at BP. We are led by you. May we continue to be led by you. Thank you, and thank you.